So now we're moving on to steel. So what I've done here is I've actually changed my detail on my structural tube plan, my filled region, to cover up the concrete side. So I'm just focusing on the steel side. It's not a requirement, it just helps me sort of focus on this side of the building. And now I can see I only have one opening that I have to deal with. And I'm going to frame into this sort of steel, or sorry, this edge of the column, so, edge of the concrete structure, into these beams, so I haven't covered them up with the masking region. If we go to structure and column, you can see that there's a couple steel structures already loaded, but what we're going to use in this class is tube steel. So we need to go ahead and load the family. And this isn't in structural framing. We actually need to go to the Imperial Families and go to structural columns, go to steel, and we need the HSS hollow sections. So we're going to hit OK there. And this is a fairly different dialog than the concrete. Because concrete can be adjusted to very particular scenarios, steel is sort of pre-manufactured and brought to site. So typically you'll have the engineer will have a steel manual, and we're not going to go into steel design in this class, but you can pick from a few different types of steel. And the first sort of letter, that's the profile, that's how the steel beam or column is made. And HSS here stands for hollow structural steel. And the second number is your height. So here you can see this is 14. It's your height in inches. So this is 1 foot 2 inches. So you can see that's reflected by 14. The second number is your width. So this is the width of the total beam, which is 6 inches. And then you have T, which is your last sort of parameter, which is a nominal dimension of the thickness of the steel that makes up the column or the beam. I'm going to scroll down here to a 10 by 10, so it's a square profile, and I'm going to choose a 3/8 thickness steel. And now it's going to load in my HSS section. And this is basically the same as concrete. So you want to make sure you're placing it by its depth. You could place it at its grids, or you can place it manually. So here, for instance, I might want to place in some elements, and I can align these afterwards. So I can align, the edge of this to the structural members. I can also go into structure column, make sure I'm placing that HSS section. And if I place it on a grid line, I can then move my wall to that. So if you remember from the concrete tutorial, there was a wall that was overlapping. What we need to do is make a decision as to whether the wall is on the inside or the column is on the inside. Now, because this was placed on a grid line, you can move that grid line as long as the column says move with grid. Or we can adjust the wall to go to the outside of the steel section. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab this and then use the align tool to make it flush with the column, and the rest of the wall will follow. So if I go to my 3D view here, you can see my HSS structural members are being placed here. And in just the last video, I showed you how to adjust the columns. I'm just going to show this here in this video for structural steel. Again, you can control a few parameters. You can control where it starts. You can control its offset. This is typically a negative number, but sometimes it's a positive number if you have some framing that starts off the ground. You can change its top level here, so we can actually go all the way to the roof if we know that this is a 3-story lobby, for instance. We can change its top offset, so we can go 4 feet, although this would typically be broken. And for thermal break purposes, and the way we would do that is we can use the split element tool and split that element into 2. And here you can see that it was actually cut at the roof level. So now I have two elements, and I can always change this again to level 4. And that's essentially how steel columns work. They're very similar to concrete columns, except you have to know what you're selecting from that menu. And you can always change this stuff. We can go ahead and edit type. We can actually change the B and the H numbers, but it's much easier to just load in a new family. So we can go to Insert, Load Family, find a steel structural column, choose the HSS hollow structural steel again, and it will allow us to pick another number. So let's choose a slightly smaller element. Let's choose like an 8x8. There we go, 8x8 square, 3/16 is fine. And now you can see that that is available to choose from the menu. There we go.